All right. Handheld gaming, always exciting, always pushing the limits. And today, we're diving into a device that's making some serious waves, the AYN Odin 2 Mini Pro.
A pocket-sized powerhouse, from what I've heard.
That's the word on the street, and we've got a pretty detailed review here from DROIX blogs. They seem to think it lives up to the hype. You mentioned wanting something that could handle both those indie darlings and your PS2 classics, and this Mini Pro, well, it might just be the ticket.
Now that's a claim worth investigating. You don't throw around terms like king of Android handhelds lightly.
They actually do call it that in the review.
Yeah.
Speaking of kings, remember the Sony Vita?
The Vita, a classic for sure.
The review keeps comparing the Mini Pro's size to it. They say it's even smaller than the original Odin 2.
Smaller and lighter, apparently. Always a good sign for portability. But does that mean they had to compromise on build quality?
That's a good question. We'll have to dig into that. They do mention it feeling really good in the hand, though. Buttons are all in the right place, comfortable for those marathon gaming sessions.
Which is crucial. I've had my fair share of handhelds that felt like they were designed for a robot, not a human. Ergonomics are so important.
They definitely are. No one wants their hands cramping up in the middle of an epic boss battle. Okay, so comfortable, compact, but can it handle the heat? Let's get down to the nitty-gritty, the specs. Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 CPU, Adreno 740 GPU. Now, for those of us who don't speak tech jargon, what does all that even mean?
All right, let's break it down. Think of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 as the brain of the operation. This thing handles everything, from loading times to how smoothly those graphics appear on screen. Basically, it's the muscle behind the device.
So no more lag, those open-world games you love, no more stuttering every 5 seconds.
That's the promise, at least. And the Adreno 740, that's your graphics card. Think vibrant colors, detailed textures, and a smooth, stutter-free picture, even during those intense action sequences.
So we're talking almost PS4-level graphics in a device that fits in your pocket.
That's the claim. And from the benchmarks in this review, it seems like they might be onto something.
Powerful is good, but it's gotta last, right? Especially if you're on the go. Battery life always a crucial factor for handhelds.
Absolutely, can't argue with that. The DROIX blog's review mentions 2 hours and 45 minutes.
2 hours, 45. That's with the benchmarks, though, right? Pushing it to the max.
Yeah, they really put it through its paces.
So for normal use, actually playing games, what are we thinking?
Well, it's always tough to give a hard number because so much depends on the game itself, screen brightness, all that. But if it can handle almost 3 hours of benchmarking, I'd say conservatively you're looking at least 6, maybe 8 hours of solid playtime.
That's not bad at all. That's a long flight, no problem. Okay, but what about the other important factor? Fan noise. Some of these handhelds, they sound like you're launching a rocket.
Ah, yes, the dreaded jet engine effect.
Not exactly conducive to an immersive gaming experience.
Right. Luckily, they included decibel readings in the review. At its loudest, they measured it at 66 decibels.
66 decibels. That doesn't tell me much, to be honest. Put that into perspective for me.
Think of a normal conversation, that's about 60 decibels. So slightly louder, but not by much.
Okay, so unless I'm usually screaming at the TV while I game, should be all right then.
Exactly. Sounds like they managed the thermals pretty well.
And speaking of thermals, what about heat? Some handhelds turn into little ovens after a while.
Yeah, nobody wants a hand warmer instead of a gaming device. The review mentions a maximum temperature of 49 degrees Celsius.
49, that's pretty warm.
That was under extreme stress testing, though. In real-world use, it's unlikely to get that hot.
Okay, that's good to know. So we've got a device that's comfortable, relatively quiet, doesn't overheat. But what about the games themselves? What can you actually play on this thing?
And that's where the AYN Odin 2 Mini Pro gets really interesting. Because it runs on Android, you're not limited to just one app store, one ecosystem.
So you're telling me I could potentially play some of those mobile games I've been eyeing, but with actual buttons and joystick?
Exactly. No more awkward touch controls. And on top of that, the Mini Pro comes with built-in screen mapping software.
Screen mapping?
It lets you map those on-screen touch controls to the physical buttons and joysticks. So even if a game wasn't designed for a controller, you can customize it to work perfectly with the Mini Pro.
It's pretty slick. Does it actually work well, though?
They tested it out with a couple of games, Vampire Survivors and Off-Road Legends, and it seemed to work flawlessly.
Good choices, too. Vampire Survivors, nice and fast-paced, really tests the responsiveness.
And Off-Road Legends, well, that's right up your alley, isn't it?
You know me too well. If it can handle that smoothly, it's got to be capable of some serious gaming.
Okay, so we've got a decent selection of Android games covered, but the real question is emulation.
Yes. Reliving the classics.
They claim it can emulate just about everything up to the PSP era. Bold statement.
They even included screenshots of Gran Turismo and Outrun 2006 running incredibly smoothly. Emulation is a huge selling point for a lot of handheld gamers, especially for those of us who grew up with those older consoles.
It's like having a whole library of gaming history right there in your pocket. But they did mention some limitations with Yuzu, the Nintendo Switch emulator. How much of a deal breaker is that? That's the thing about Switch emulation. It's a whole other beast. It's notoriously difficult to get right. But the scene is always evolving, always improving. Might not be playing the latest Zelda flawlessly just yet, but hey, there's always hope for the future.
So it's powerful, it's portable, it can handle the latest Android games, and it lets us relive those classic console experiences through emulation. It's like the Swiss Army knife of handheld gaming. But the big question is it enough to crown the AYN Odin 2 Mini Pro the king of Android handhelds? That's what this DROIX blogs review seems to suggest.
They make a compelling case, that's for sure.
Yep.
Ticks a lot of boxes. But like we always say, it all comes down to individual needs. What's perfect for one gamer might not be the right fit for another.
Exactly. And you mentioned wanting a device that could keep up with those long gaming sessions on the go, no more searching for outlets every 5 minutes.
Crucial, especially for someone who travels as much as I do.
And from what we've seen, the Mini Pro's battery life seems pretty solid. 6 to 8 hours, even with those more demanding games.
Not too shabby at all, especially with that comfortable design they keep raving about. You don't want to cut a gaming session short because your hands are cramping up.
Absolutely. Comfort is key. But, for me, gaming has always been about more than just the specs or even the games themselves. It's about connecting with others, sharing those experiences, whether it's through online multiplayer or, dare I say it, good old-fashioned couch co-op.
There's a certain magic to that, isn't there? Gathering around a screen with friends, controllers in hand.
Exactly. And, with its focus on classic gaming and that compact design, the Mini Pro could actually be a really cool way to bring back that social gaming experience.
Imagine, instead of everyone staring at their phones, you've got a group huddled around this little device, battling it out in Street Fighter or reliving the glory days of GoldenEye.
Now that's a gaming night I can get behind. It's not just a personal device, it's a conversation starter, a way to connect with people.
Exactly. It adds a whole other dimension to the experience.
It really does. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. From the Mini Pro's impressive specs and comfortable design to its ability to handle those demanding Android games and emulate those beloved classics, we even pondered whether it could spark a resurgence of couch co-op. But ultimately, the choice is yours, dear listener. Hopefully, this deep dive has given you a better understanding of the AYN Odin 2 Mini Pro and what it brings to the table. Whether it's the handheld gaming revolution we've all been waiting for, well, that's for you to decide.
And hey, if it gets you and your friends gathered around for a night of gaming, isn't that a win in itself?
Absolutely. Until next time, happy gaming, everyone!